Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just start with a very short and quick prayer. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatyai Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Samasta Janakalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Sadgurum Brahma. So there are various reasons why parents choose to consider the Bal Vihar program. The most common of which that we have heard is because we are living in a foreign country, we want them to learn the values and the teachings of our motherland and hopefully stay connected with our region. So either we want to give them the values, just the stories, just the connection to our religion, connection to our culture. That seems to be one of the most common reasons why people want to put their children in Bal Vihar. The second one is when they grow up, how these teachings may potentially help them be useful as very honorable citizens in the country over here. That seems to be the other reason why people want to join the Bal Vihar program. But as we continue to work through and go through these various phases, before we get into understanding why our children want Bal Vihar, there are 2-3 important perspectives from us as parents that will be useful to get a sense of as to why one would like to join Bal Vihar and various other factors. So before I get started on that, I thought I'll just launch a quick poll. It's a very simple poll. So if you can just answer that question, that will be wonderful. I'm just launching that particular poll. So just answer this question. In comparison to our parents, grandparents, do we have more availability of amenities, tools, and gadgets to do our job? Or even makes our life easier? We have utilities, we have tools, and various other things to make our life easier. So, if you would respond, we'll probably turn it off in like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Both agree that we all have more access and more availability to the tools, and we have better access to amenities. So that being the case, now comes the second interesting question, which is, in comparison to our parents and grandparents, is our stress level, tension, and worries have gone up, stayed the same, or decreased? So you see the responses there. I will end this poll and we can see the response again. There's a unanimous decision here. It says our stress level, our tensions and worries have increased in comparison to our parents and grandparents. And now the last question, which I will launch, and then we will get started with our discussion. Which is, in comparison to our parents and grandparents, is our happiness, peace, and contentment increased, decreased, or stayed about the same? It's amazing. We have unanimous answer in all 3 questions. So here again, I'm sharing the result. It seems to have decreased. So now the question is why? I was actually thinking about this a while ago. If my great grandparents were alive, and they happen to see my lifestyle and my life that I'm living today with the amenities, tools, and gadgets, especially if my great grandparents were in India and I am living in America, they probably would think I have come to heaven, right? In terms of the amenities, features, and functionalities that I have, they probably are going to think I've actually come to heaven rather than another place on this earth. So clearly, there seems to be some disconnect between the comforts, the amenities, the tools that we have, and which is supposed to make us more happier, which is supposed to make our life more easier, more comfortable to deal with, and more enjoyable. But unfortunately, with the increase of these tools and comforts, we seem to be getting more and more stressed, more and more worried, and less happy and content. And it is this disconnect that Gurudev Swami Chinmaya set out to solve and resolve through the entire Chinmaya mission activity. And as Anantji said in the introduction, the motto of Chinmaya mission is to provide maximum happiness to maximum number of people for maximum amount of time. Now, how is it possible that all around us we are seeing decreased happiness and decreased contentment, increased stress, and still we are able to achieve this particular activity? And this has been the core discussion of all our scriptures that have been set about from time immemorial, but very little of us have access to it. I myself did not know any of this existed 13 years ago, when I did not even know what Chinmaya Mission was in 2008. My wife decided that my son needs to get some knowledge of the Indian culture and decided to send them to Vihar. And she said, why every week, during the week, I take him to all the classes. On the weekend, why don't you take him to this class? And that's how I ended up at Chinmaya Mission way back in 2008, not knowing what my wife had signed me up for. But then the very first time I came into the class, I fell in love with what Vijayji was teaching at that time. Vijayji was the Acharya teaching us Bhagavad Gita. And I fell in love with the concept and the idea. And this has been the essential objective that Gurudev was trying to resolve through these various activities that we are trying to achieve. Now the question is this conundrum that we just discussed something that we should solve ourselves first, or should it be the focus of solving it for our children? Right? Do we want to seek more happiness first, or do we want our children to seek more happiness? And the answer is typically both. We want to be more happy. We also want our children to be more happy through this particular process. So Bal Vihar is always an integrated program where both parents and children come together and grow together through the values and systems that we get. Now, our Vedic literature is what we call as the Vedas, which are in the 4 Vedas, but none of us know how to read Sanskrit, and even if we do, we don't understand many of the words that is written in it, and we have very little access to the scriptures. So, Veda Vyasa knew this and composed the 18 Puranas with the hope that the Puranas will get us closer to this concept of scriptures. Again, same problem. We don't have access to it, one. Even if we do, we don't understand it, we are not able to read it. We then go down to the Itihasas and Puranas, Itihasas, which is the Mahabharata and Ramayana. That we have some access to it, but only to the extent that it has been televised in the television shows, that we know pieces of that particular story, and we know it more in a story format than on a day-to-day using format. So clearly, our access to all this information has been pretty significantly impacted. So what Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda did, which is unique, and that is why he is called a Yuga Purusha, is took all that knowledge that is available and brought it down to us, who are what Gurudev in his famous words will call it as convent college educated people. Right? So we are the English convent college educated people who have lost touch with our own scriptures. So he took the trouble of taking all this knowledge and presenting it in a format, in a way that we all can understand. And we all can connect and get to know what is happening. Now, I will shift topic to a slightly different point before I connect the two pieces together. We all are used to telling our children that values have to be practiced, whether it is honesty, whether it is truthfulness, whether it is being kind to other people. These are all values that we tell our children that one should practice. Now, what you will observe, first observe your own self. How many of the values that our parents told us are important to us that we really actually practice? Very little in our day-to-day. What we actually practiced in terms of the values and virtues are what our parents actually practiced, not what they told us. Now you will see this, that majority of the values that we have inculcated is what our parents, our grandparents, our uncles and aunts actually practiced and lived their lives for. That is what connects to us because we see that on a day-to-day basis. So as parents, the most common thing that I have heard one of our Swamijis say it regularly, and I use it fairly often, is we tell our children that you need to be honest. You should always tell the truth. And then somewhere, sometime a phone call rings and it happens to be a marketing phone call, and your child accidentally happens to pick it up, and you immediately tell the child, tell them I'm not available, and keep the phone. So what have we done? We've confused the child. We've told the child you should always tell the truth on one end, but on the other end, we have kind of told the child, it is okay once in a while to say, whether it is a white lie or not, it is a lie that we have asked our child to communicate. So this confusion will now stay deep in the child's mind, and as they grow older, they will come to say, it is okay to tell a lie as long as it is not affecting anybody. And then that slowly becomes a habit and continues to become a strong, deep-rooted process in the children's mind. So before we can give values, virtues, and understanding to our children, we need to learn to practice it on our own self on a day-to-day basis. And this becomes the most essential component of the Bal Vihar activity, is for us to be aware, to be knowing, and to be connected through the various activities that our children are also learning at the same time in Bal Vihar. And that is why Gurudev thought that this whole program is a family program, not a place where you just drop the kid off and go off to do other activities and chores and come and pick them up again. It needs to be fully integrated from that perspective. Now, I will tell you from my own experience perspective what has worked through this whole process. My son, who is now 18 and is going to college this year, has been a Bal Vihar student from when he was 4 years old. I really have not spent a lot of time teaching him anything. What has been taught to him is by our wonderful Bal Vihar teachers over the multiple years that he has been here in Bal Vihar through this year. He has learned, understood the various values, and he is able to practice it today, not because what me or my wife have actually taught him, it is only because he's been growing in this particular environment. Now, as the years progress, as he gets into middle school, as he gets into the early stages of high school, the school activities take more priority over what is happening at Chinmaya Mission. Now, the only way this continues to remain a priority for a child is if the parent is still connected to the mission and the parent shows that there is value in continuing in this mission. And only then the child says, okay, I will continue with this particular Vihar activity. So connection of both the parent and the child becomes an important aspect of the child holding on to these ideas and concepts as we continue to grow forward. And you might say, I don't have the time, I don't have the interest, I do it in other places. Those are all activities that one can do, but keep in mind, this gap of more comforts versus less happiness is only going to get wider as the years continue to progress. And the only way to bridge this gap is to bring them to our basic knowledge and scriptures that we can connect them to. And unfortunately, this is not a knowledge that is taught in schools. This is not a knowledge that is taught in colleges. This is not a knowledge that they will learn from their friends. This is not a knowledge that they will get from going to work and learning through the work processes. So there needs to be an environment where they can get this knowledge. Otherwise, they are only going to be even more stressed, even more worried, even less happy. Though they might have more money, though they might have more comforts, they're only going to be less happy. And is that what we want for our children? Absolutely not, because everything that we do is only for the happiness of our own children. And the only way we can ensure that happiness is alongside the secular knowledge, we are giving them this knowledge as well. So I will stop here. So now the question that you can ask is, how will my child learn the values that we are giving them? For many of us, if you remember your childhood, at least for myself, most of what I learned was learning through reading books like Chanda Mama, Amar Chitrakatha, and stuff like that, which is the stories that are there in our Puranas that these books have done an amazing job of compiling and putting together. And it is through these stories that we learn most of what we need to learn in our day-to-day basis. Earlier days, even before our generation, it was mostly the grandparents and grandmother, grandfather, uncle, and aunt telling the stories. Then it came down to one step further below, where we would read the books, like as I said, Chanda Mama, Amar Chitrakatha, and read the stories. But as we move into today's world, many of those stories are taken over by the nursery rhymes and stuff that is there online, which does do a fair bit of job of communicating the values. I would not say no, but they don't go into the depth of communicating these stories. So I would take a minute and a half. We're going to play a video by our Swamiji as to how we communicate this knowledge, both in Bal Vihar and in our summer camps.
The noble values of life must be given from childhood onwards. How to impart the noble values of life from childhood onwards? Children love stories. When I'm narrating a story, I can see the joy in the child's eyes. I enjoy seeing the children identifying with the hero. When they are identifying with the hero, they are not only identifying with the hero, but also they are assimilating the noble values of life lived by the hero. Thus, it is easy to impart the values of life from childhood onwards through the stories of heroes who lived the noble life of virtue, courage, and wisdom. Hari Om.
This is our Swamiji,
The
Swamiji
noble,
who is the Swamiji for Chinmaya Mission Washington Regional Center chapter. And if any child is listened to Swamiji once, Swamiji is a magnet to attract them to the stories. And most commonly from our Virginia side, most of these people meet Swamiji in the summer camp. And then they are glued to Swamiji for every summer camp to come through the process. And in December, Swamiji comes over here as well to give the messages. He is in the Silver Spring chapter, and every now and then we will be playing videos of Swamiji telling stories as well. So stories is the essential way by which we inculcate these values and virtues in our Bal Vihar children in the early days, all the way up until they come to the higher end of the elementary school. Essential component happens to be stories. Even when they get into middle school and even into high school, we still use the stories, but now augment the stories with discussions on the various topics that is being brought up. And it is those discussions that stay with them through the process. Now you might say that, how can this help the children? Now, interestingly, these stories are so powerful stories that they don't work at the conscious mind level. They work at the subconscious mind level and sow the seeds of these values for it to germinate at a later point in time. As a Bal Vihar teacher, I always say this: if you expect your child to come out of the Bal Vihar class and tell you exactly what they understood from that particular class, you might be surprised that they probably have understood nothing. They will say, nothing, I didn't hear anything, I heard this. They might even tell you a story or two, but it is not that knowledge that they have superficially gained that is the essential message. Our job as Bal Vihar teachers is to sow the seed in them so that when they cross through the teenage, they finish their college, and then they are in their work life, that these seeds starts to germinate little by little. When they have their first child, that's when it really starts to germinate, because now they have become parents and these things become useful and valuable to them through the process. So that is the format and methodology that Gurudev envisioned through the Bal Vihar. And he always said, catch them young if you can. And our goal through Bal Vihar is to catch them young. But having said all this, I'll go back to the same point that I made before, which is, unless the entire family is connected through the entire methodology of learning, it will not have that impact that we, Gurudev, the entire Guru Sishya Parampara envisioned for it to happen. It only happens when the entire family is integrated, working together, sharing the same thing, discussing the same stories in various formats, in various environments. And it doesn't have to be every day. Even if you're discussing with your child once a month, which is more than enough to know that your child is interested in this idea, for the child to know that you think that this is valuable and important, and for that connection to get stronger and stronger as we continue to move forward. So what we do is we have adult classes where we offer the same knowledge, but at the higher level, which is more philosophy. Then it comes down to the high school children where it is topics for discussion based on their age group. Then it comes down even further, which is stories plus topics of discussion. And then at the lowest level, it is just stories. And this is not a concept that is new. Gurudev just copied what Veda Vyasji did into our format here. What Veda Vyasaji did was compiled all the Vedas, then compiled all the Smritis, which is discussion on the Vedas. Then he wrote the various Puranas, where the same concepts are discussed more in small stories. Then he composed the entire Mahabharata, and the Ramayana was composed, which then presents all the stories in day-to-day life format. Same idea was picked up by Gurudev and said that the entire family has to be given, the older people the philosophy, the middle people the stories with discussion, and the younger people just the stories. And this is how the entire mission operates as a family program, giving this knowledge and sharing this information so that the whole family grows. And hopefully through this process, we are able to reverse that trend, which is what we started with. Increased comforts, decreased happiness. We are able to reverse the trend and say, comforts may go up and may continue to go up, because that is what human mind is built for. Both the secular and the spiritual side have to be developed simultaneously. But can I find happiness and can I remain happy independent of the comfort? That is what the vision is, and that is what the goal is. Okay. So I'll make a couple of closing comments and discussions. The whole purpose of the Bal Vihar program, as Gurudev is envisioned, is for the development of the child. But for the development of the child, it is necessary that the entire family grows together, because, as I said, the child learns more from observing what we are doing than hearing what we are saying. And that being the case, unless the entire family is connected and doing it together, it does not produce the level of effectiveness that we have seen happen. I can tell you with my personal experience, I've been a Bal Vihar teacher now for 10, 11 years now. Generally, what we observe is children in the middle school and high school, those children continue to remain in Bal Vihar when their parents are doing some kind of seva activity in Chinmaya Somnath or regular Chinmaya Somnath. Nothing that the parent probably did different from the other parent. The only difference is the parents get connected alongside the child and indicated indirectly to the child that this is an important value and an important program. And that connection was sufficient enough to get the child through the process into the next phase. And as I said, once the seed is sown, you don't have to worry. As our Swamiji always says very beautifully, Swamiji says, you give your child to me and the rest is my responsibility. And that is what Gurudev always says. You bring the child to the mission and then it is Gurudev's responsibility to mold the child's future more from an internal development perspective, in addition to all that we are doing as parents for the secular world. So with that, I will conclude today's session with a short closing prayer. Thank you all for joining. Have a good afternoon. Let me just complete with the closing prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Om Kaschit Dukkha Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha Hari Om
अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः।
अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जलशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः।